All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Dylan Hosier. I am a proud graduate of an LAUSD high school, John F. Kennedy High School in Granada Hills, and I serve as the Chief Advocacy Officer at the Israeli American Civic Action Network, or as our friends like to call us, ICANN. We are an organization dedicated to empowering Israeli and American grassroots advocates and leaders creating change for a better America, a more secure Israel, and a stronger U.S.-Israel alliance through advocacy and civic action. Tonight, we are pleased to present to you the special broadcast for the Israeli community in Los Angeles with Los Angeles Unified School District Board Member Nick Melvoin from the 4th District. Joining us, we have a great panel of Israeli mothers from across Los Angeles to talk with Board Member Melvoin about the issues facing our community at LAUSD, and I'll bring them up now. So first, we have Vered El-Kobi-Nissim, our ICANN California Chairwoman, and Irina Rappaport-Bridges, Orly Travish, and we have one more person joining us. She'll hopefully be with us later, is Eden Schechter. So here, Vered, I will go ahead and let you introduce the board member.
Hi.
So
good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dylan. My name is Vered El-Kobi-Nissim. I serve as the ICANN Chairwoman for California. I am a proud Israeli-American mother. I am pleased to introduce our special guest this evening, Mr. Nick Melvoin, who serves as the Los Angeles Unified School District, District 4 Board Member. Board Member Melvoin holds a bachelor's degree from Harvard University, a master's in urban education from Loyola Marymount University, and a law degree from the New York University School of Law. Born and raised on the west side of LA, Board Member Melvoin served as a 7th and 8th grade English teacher at Markham Middle School, an LAUSD campus in Watts, where he coached soccer and baseball and helped his students launch a school newspaper. In addition to serving as a teacher, Board Member Melvoin has worked with the Obama White House, with the Domestic Policy Council, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, where he took part in various civil rights investigations as a legal clerk. Today, Board Member Melvoin leads and facilitates efforts by students, parents, teachers, and community members to rethink and shape the future of our city schools. Board Member Melvoin, thank you so much for joining us tonight and addressing our community. Tonight, we hope to speak with you about issues surrounding our schools and COVID-19 and the importance of foreign language education and the possibility of adding Hebrew as an option to relevant schools, and final ways in which we can promote cross-community engagement to help stem the rising tide of anti-Semitism and other forms of intolerance. My first question this evening, the LAUSD school year is supposed to start on August 18th. I understand from media reports that education will be only online. What can you tell us about recent decisions related to starting the school year and how to ensure the safety of our students?
Well, thank you, Vered, and thanks, Dylan, and thank you all so much for having me. It's a pleasure to join ICANN. And I was saying earlier, kind of before we went live, that my day began with a similar conversation with the Friends of Sheba Medical Center. So I bookended my day with Israeli audiences, and so it's some form of beshert. So I'm pleased to join you all, and I know there's a lot to get through. So, about a month ago, if you had asked me this question, I would have said that when our school year begins on August 18th, we would likely be doing a hybrid of online and in-person instruction. But then there was the recent spike of cases in Los Angeles, and we're nearing 10% in positive infections. In LA, the World Health Organization recommends not reopening an economy, not reopening a region if you're above 5%. And we also don't have the requisite testing and contact tracing regimen that we needed in place. And I spent a lot of time looking around the world and at Israel specifically when we look at reopening and what criteria was important for physical reopening, and then what happened. And I think that those two things, which are infection rates being low and testing and contact tracing being high, and unfortunately in LA, we have the inverse. And so we made the decision a few weeks ago to start online only. We did that so that we give parents enough time to plan. Coincidentally, about 3 or 4 days after we made that announcement, Governor Newsom then tied school districts' hands by putting some state parameters in place. And so right now, if you're on the state watch list as a county, for spikes in coronavirus infections, and that is many counties in the state, including Los Angeles, you can't physically reopen until you're off that watch list for at least 14 consecutive days. And the reason that's important maybe to our audience is because when we made that decision, it was just for LA Unified, but the governor's mandate now includes independent schools, parochial schools, private schools, and independent charter schools. And so we're opening August 18th online, but we're doing everything we can to bring students back in person, because I want to be very clear that there's no replacement for in-person education. And we need to do everything we can to get kids back where they belong, in schools, not only because of the academics, but the social emotional growth, the parents who are either have childcare issues or are just pulling their hair out, having dealt with this for so long. So we'll be back August 18th, but starting potentially even a few weeks later, we're going to be looking at what's the case level in the county. We're looking at setting up our own testing regimen, which I'll have more information about in the coming days and weeks, as we've just sought out test providers ourselves and trying to procure our own tests. And then the goal would be to phase in that physical in-person instruction throughout the next few months. But I'll also say my last word on this point will be we've learned a lot from online instruction in the spring when we transitioned overnight. One, every student now has access to the internet. We started the closure with about 100,000 students who didn't have access to the internet. And so we've delivered devices and internet hotspots. We also have increased the rigor. And actually today and the rest of the week, we are at the bargaining table with our teachers union to make sure we can agree upon a high standard of instruction, daily attendance, daily live synchronous instructions, both small group and class-wide, assessments so that we can see how kids are doing throughout the course of the semester. So it will be an improved experience as we are also working to bring kids back physically as soon as we can.
Thank you. Do we have any sort of timeline or what this looks like based on some of the testing that's coming into LA? Are we looking at potentially September, October? Are we looking at after the holidays? Do we have any idea?
So I think that first bellwether is going to be the rate of positive infections. And I mentioned it was nearing 10%. I think it's down closer to 7% now in LA. I haven't checked as of today. And so once we get it down and we get off the governor's watch list, then there's a 2-week period where you have to remain on that. So I think, if let's say tomorrow we get off the watch list, it would be at least 2 weeks. I think what we're looking at realistically, Vered, is starting after Labor Day, hopefully having the testing regimen in place where we could bring back maybe employees. Every employee could be at a school site for a week, make sure folks are safe, and then start to bring back students. And we're looking at many different approaches, but one of them is a phased-in approach where we would start with elementary school students and maybe bring them in, start with our younger learners, really make sure that we get that right, and then move on to high school, both because high school students can do remote learning more effectively. They can sit down and focus. Screen time isn't as much of an issue, but also because what we know about younger kids with the transmission of the virus, and this is where Israeli doctors were very helpful to me on this conversation this morning, that there's just less risk factor. So, I think to your question, post Labor Day, we'll start hopefully being able to find a way to get folks back in person.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Vered. So we'll go ahead and bring in Rena. Vered, you're good. Do you have any other questions? You're good?
I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, we'll bring in Rena here. All right, Rena, you're up.
Hi. Good evening, Nick, and thank you so much for taking the time and doing this. It's very important to get a briefing and get some answers to our questions. So I'm Rena. I'm a proud LAUSD mother. It's been I have 2 daughters, 4 and 6 years old. So Abby, our daughter, finished TK last year and going to kindergarten. So we're fairly new. And then I have 2 concerns that kind of connect to each other. Both my husband and I were fortunate enough to keep our jobs during this pandemic, and we have to work. So with this distant learning scenario, and Abby's 6 years old, she needs close monitoring and guidance for the Zoom meetings and for this kind of learning. What options, if any, are available for working families to start this this period of distant learning? And then, if I may, the second part of my question is, there are private tutoring pods that are forming these days to kind of accommodate us working families. And if we do decide to send our child to private learning kind of thing, and she won't do the distant learning, how and if at all it will affect her ability to go back when the time comes to normal instruction?
Yeah, great questions. And what a fraught time to be new parents in LA Unified, but
yep.
I appreciate your support. And I do love this format that we can hear from different parents. So the first one, the childcare option and kind of how to support working families has been on my mind since we made the announcement to close schools on March 13th, because LA Unified, 82% of our students are living in poverty. And so we have, many parents, you both included, who are working. We have others who are working multiple jobs, others who don't have certain childcare options. And so initially, when we closed on a Friday, my hope was that on that Wednesday to open up a series of childcare centers throughout this county that would also serve food. We were half successful. We have been running the largest food bank in the country at these 63, what we call grab-and-go food centers throughout the region, but we never got the sign-off from the public health officials to operate the child care centers. And and because I'm not an epidemiologist and we're a school district, we've really been deferring to public health experts here at the county and state level. And it's been frustrating because now we're going on 4 or 5 months where we haven't been able to provide a childcare option. So what we're looking at for the fall is a few things. One, we lease our facilities to certain nonprofit and third-party providers. Some of you may have heard of STAR, which is an education provider, or the YMCA. Or in some cases, even we're working on a negotiation right now with a Chabad in Brentwood on the west side. And we're looking at, well, can we, if we're not comfortable running schools yet as a district, can we lease our property to those nonprofits, to those third parties, to provide childcare options? And some around the city are. Some of these STAR providers are operating. Mm-hmm. We're also looking at partnerships with the city, with the county, and even with private entities like synagogues and churches around leasing their space. Because what I believe will happen is that when we go back physically, we'll have this hybrid model, which is something you see in Israel, you see around the world, where some kids will come on Monday and Wednesday, other kids will come on Tuesday or Thursday. But that doesn't mean that the days where your kids aren't in school, that they can maybe sit at home. So we're looking right now at contracting with these other entities, so that even if your daughter is only in school Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, maybe her school, she can go to a local recreation center, a local synagogue, and have childcare that would be free there. And so admittedly, we have, those are things that we are still working on, because we realize how difficult it is for families when school is closed. And so I would say the order of operations there, we need the public health clearance that we've been working on, and we have daily conversations. And then logistically, we just need to figure out where to put students. We're also trying to promote private childcare options, and so if there are things like We Care and others that I have worked with to try to get discounts or fee waivers for LA Unified parents, which isn't the first option because those still cost money, but we're trying to make those options available. To your second question, I think this is, what I'll say is that I'm a big believer in parental choice, that parents are going to choose what's right for their kids, and that I don't, as an elected official, as a politician, don't want to stand in the way of you and the decision for your family. And that's true if you're choosing a charter school or a district school. That's true if you're choosing a parochial school. And so that's also true if you're choosing a pod-based environment. And I think one of the challenges for the district writ large is because we have such a high percentage of our families in poverty, we have to balance kind of those families who are able to do the pod learning with those families who are not. But at the school level, what I have been encouraging the principals in my district is to work with families to do what we can to accommodate the pod environment, so that we can be as supportive and work as a team as opposed to oppositionally. So I think that there are a few ways I'm hearing this being done. One is parents may want to unenroll their kid from LA Unified for a few months and then go back, and that's fine. And we'll do everything we can to make sure your son or daughter is caught up with the schoolwork. But I also think there's a way that you can stay enrolled in LA Unified and still have that pod experience, which means work around, if you're just doing the online schedule those pod lessons for before or after the online lessons. When we do go back to a hybrid, if your daughter is going back Monday and Wednesday, maybe you would do the pod private teaching, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And so it will be up to individual teachers and principals to work with families. But what I am pushing from the top is that we do so in a collaborative environment. So you would tell us, just like we do right now, if students have special needs and they have their IEP plan, if they have a tutor, my hope would be that every teacher, and I go back to my teaching hat when I was a middle school teacher, would work with parents to figure out how to support your son or daughter's learning. And so I think that this is a matter of first impression, but we're going to find a way to work with parents who are doing that pod-based instruction to the extent possible, while also realizing that's not an option for a lot of families in LA. So hope that answers those questions.
So Rena, before you ask Eden's question, we have a viewer question from Noemi Torres, who says, "Great question, Rena." And Noemi wants to know if LA City Council, or maybe even the state, will be giving any grants or financial support to parents who are working from home and need money for healthcare.
Yeah, it's a great question, Naomi, and I hope so. We have a weird system in LA. We are just as in atypical compared to other cities like New York or DC, where the school board is different from the city and the county. So there are 7 of us who are elected officials full-time who run the public schools, but that's different from the city council and different from the board of supervisors. And so I'm spending a lot of my time doing advocacy at those other levels of government for the funding. For example, I mentioned our food bank effort. We're serving over 600,000 meals a day to anybody who comes to one of our schools. We're not asking questions, we're not asking for ID, and about 20% of those meals are adults. But we don't get reimbursed from the federal government for adult meals. And so Councilman Koretz at the city council has introduced a resolution at my urging to have the city explore whether they could reimburse the school district for the meals we provide to adults. And those meals we're continuing to provide until schools are open. Similarly, it would be the city or the county who would really have the resources, the wherewithal to provide those financial supports to parents who are working from home, stipends for childcare, for example. And we've been encouraging our colleagues at the city and the county to do that. We've also been trying to find ways where we can help. And one example that I mentioned earlier is as we look to procure our own tests, we may be looking at spending millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars to get enough tests so that we could test students and families as they come back to school to relieve any financial burden on them or the healthcare system. Now, typically schools we don't provide, let's say, TB tests. We just verify. But in this unique circumstance, we're doing all we can. But I would encourage you all to reach out to the city council, the board of supervisors, because I think this is a great idea. And if we're not able to provide legally yet that in-person childcare, it would be great if the city had a program where they could provide those subsidies.
So Rena, do you want to go ahead and ask on behalf of Eden? She wasn't able to make it this afternoon. So
yes, absolutely. So I'll skip the good evening board member.
Yes.
So parents that whose kids go to charter schools, and you did mention that since the government mandated everybody, children that go to charter schools, and how will they be affected by this LAUSD decision to go online only? And are there any differences at all for charter schools as you can see them?
Yeah. So, in light of the governor's order, there are these certain kind of threshold questions like, do you even have the authority to reopen that will affect charter schools? And so independent charter schools, there are more in LA than anywhere in the country. We have some familiar to maybe the Israeli community like Lashon, Hebrew language charter. We have many charters in LA. And they are still bound by the governor's order around, they're in LA County, they can't yet open. There are some waivers folks can apply for elementary schools if they do so with their teachers union or with their faculty. And so there's a little flexibility there where some schools, elementary schools, can apply for waivers. But once we get out of that 14-day period, charters do have more flexibility. Some charter schools are what we call co-located with the district, meaning they're on the same campus. And those charter schools may be required to abide by our regulations, because if we don't feel it's safe to have like our maintenance or security officers at schools, then we can't open up for charter schools. But many charter schools are on private facilities, and they would be able to potentially open more quickly. Now, I will say, I'm doing a lot to try to collaborate with charter schools. I give them a lot of credit in trying to work with us, because we have been all trying to be on the same page, especially when it comes to these issues around public health. It's tough if we're saying we can't have kids back physically because of health and safety, but then a charter school having a full campus. And we want to make sure that we're sending consistent messages. That being said, one of the reasons charter schools were founded in the first place is to have more flexibility and make decisions that are right for that school. And so I do believe that we will see some charters that will open physically maybe before the district. I'm also trying to do a lot at the district to decentralize and not just be one huge bureaucracy. So we have about 1,000 schools at LAUSD, and I'm encouraging us to look at each school individually. And some communities may be open to go back to school sooner than others. Okay. And then the corollary, when schools have to close again, or if they have to close again because of positive cases, we'll be looking on a case-by-case basis, and we won't be making any kind of blanket decisions about school closures.
Okay, thank you so much. That's really helpful.
All right, any other questions, Rena, on this one? Good to go?
No, I'm good for now. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, hold on. Barrett has a question. Go ahead, Barrett.
Hi. Do you know what the changes, once we do go back to school, what the changes that will be implemented on the school premises for the kids, whether they'll change the way that they go out on the yard or they don't, or the way that they take lunch? Do we have any idea about any of those ideas yet?
Yeah, so we've been spending a lot of our time, I've been referring it to as the like threshold questions, like can we reopen, about what's happening in the region and the public health. And then once we do reopen, what does a school day look like? And I'm sure this is familiar to parents who have just been reading about this, but I mentioned this hybrid model where in order to socially distance and keep 6 feet apart, and I should say, I've been trying to say physical distance and not socially distant, because kids need to be social. And I think it's so important to realize that, like, especially at this time of isolation, but we still need to maintain physical distance. And so, the first thing is having half the number of students on any given campus. And so that's where we're looking at either different days or a morning and an afternoon session. That may be a better option as we think about elementary school students, because spending an entire day on an iPad is not great. And I think we've been trying to balance kind of how do we give a full day of rigorous instruction with the guidelines around screen time. And so if we could do half days, that might be a better option, because then a student could be at school 5 days a week, but only in the morning or the afternoon. So we're looking at fewer students on campus. Then we're looking at sanitizing, and we've already purchased supplies to do deep cleans of schools every day, every morning, potentially the middle of the day if we're going to have a new group of kids come in, and then the evening. We're going to have masks, and this is also one of the governor's orders, that any student above 3rd grade will be required to wear masks. And so we've been purchasing a lot of both disposable and reusable masks for students and employees. And then we've had our great facilities team out at every school site, with their tape measure, figuring out how to put the desks 6 feet apart, how to put stickers on the floor, like many of you may already be seeing at restaurants or retail shops, looking at converting hallways into one way. Maybe the second floor is one way and the first floor is the other to avoid interactions. We're looking at social spaces like libraries and how would we separate students. And then, yes, with meals, we're looking at would it be safer to eat in a classroom where they're at their individual desk, or how do we socially distant or physically distant the cafeteria? And we have our facilities team, our maintenance and operations, working with experts and learning from places around the world on how to do that safely. Some grades are also looking at those dividers, desk dividers, potentially so that you could have students a little closer. But I think most of our classroom students will be 6 feet apart. Big activities that we're all fond of at schools, like assemblies and dances, will definitely be on hold for the fall, at least the fall semester. And as we think about sports, we've been trying to figure out how to have students move and play sports in socially, physically distant ways. And so could you do basketball where everyone has their own basketball? And how do you bring physical movement into that? So we have some virtual dance classes that I just had a call about earlier today that students could do their PE remotely. So we're going to be doing everything we can to mitigate the spread. But as you all know, as parents, it's very difficult to get a 5 or 6 year old to do anything. And I feel like spitting in someone's face is a prerequisite of kindergarten. And so how do you make students wear masks? How do we get other school employees to help maintain those physical distances? How do we get volunteers and parents, those parent leaders who are interested to come in and safely help? And those are the things we're working on now, so that when we do get the green light, we can have the school day ready.
Thank you so much.
Now, very real quick before we wrap up this topic, do you want to talk about the environmental? Nick Verret is very big on the environmental issues, especially surrounding PPE and masks. And we see in our neighborhoods, we see masks in the gutters and all over the place. Verret, do you want to talk a little bit about our concerns with that? Go ahead.
Absolutely. So, Nick, has there been any conversations around masks or any of the PPE products that the schools are bringing in? I mean, because if we look at LAUSD as a whole, we look at the amount of masks needed, we're talking about millions and millions of disposable masks. And so is there any plans in place for how those masks are going to be disposed of, what's happening with them, how to keep them out of the gutters, how to keep them out of the oceans? I mean, these are kids, right? So how to maybe incentivize them to utilize the bin? And, has there been any discussions around that?
Yeah, it's such an important point. And, this board and the district have been really committed to kind of environmental justice and also conservation. And we actually passed a resolution about 6 or 7 months ago, committing to go 100% renewable by 2030. Both with our bus fleet so this comes at an interesting time. And I think one of the concerns we've had about PPE is the disposable nature. And so now that the cost has gone down as well, that we're in this new reality, we're looking at a lot of reusable masks and trying to get multiple masks for certain students, but really encouraging reuse, washing masks. I think there's, to the extent that we're allowing schools to personalize masks, I think you increase the chance that students will keep them if it's like for their school. So can we have school specific masks? So a lot of my inbox is kind of manufacturers from around the world who are contacting us with PPE, and part of our procurement process is looking at kind of the environmental effects. So I think to the extent that we have disposable masks, yes, we'll be encouraging recycling. Every class will have a bin, but we're really going to be trying to purchase and then encourage families to use reusable masks with proper hygiene, so that this doesn't become an environmental crisis on top of a pandemic.
Of course. Yeah, we'd love to continue the conversation with you maybe at another time. We have a whole program that we're putting together to recycle and reuse and actually disinfect some of these disposable masks and repurpose them. So
That'd be great. And like you said, the volume here is we're talking about millions. I mean, we have, just 700,000 students, another 60,000 employees. And so we'd love to partner to find ways to kind of creatively recycle and any best practices around this. I'm all ears because
if you look at the disposable masks, let's say even if it's one per student per day, at 700,000 students, we're talking hundreds of millions of masks, per school semester, right? So definitely something that needs to be addressed. There are more important issues at hand right now, which is getting the kids back in school, of course, but then addressing these other issues for sure.
Completely. It's a really important one. So thank you for raising it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Vered. Appreciate that. All right, so we will switch gears here and bring in Orly. So Orly, you are a Hebrew teacher. I'll go ahead and let you kick it off.
Good evening, Nick. My name is Orly, and I'm a mother of 3, Gal, Reef, and Kay, and a passionate Hebrew language instructor. As you know, Hebrew is very important to the Israeli and the Jewish communities in Los Angeles, and foreign language is important to a broad and comprehensive education for any students. And we are proud that the LAUSD offers many foreign language options in its schools, except Hebrew is missing. With guidance from LAUSD staff, we have been conducting a survey of LAUSD parents and students to show demand and sustainability of possible Hebrew program at an LAUSD high school. And we have the support of nearly 300 families and 600 students in this effort. So bearing in mind and the challenges related to instruction during the pandemic, would you support the additional Hebrew language in a public high school where there is a local demand? And my next question, how can your office help us achieve this goal?
So yes, I would love to, and I'd love to help you achieve this goal. And I wish, Orly, that you were my Hebrew teacher, because I have that very basic Reform Hebrew school understanding of Hebrew, where I can phonetically read the alphabet and I'm good with the high holidays. But when I make it back to Israel, I always wish that I had a better Hebrew language education. And this is also, and I also just wish, I am someone who's always struggled with languages. My brother is fluent in English, Spanish, Mandarin, and now Italian. And I barely speak English. So this is an issue that's really close to my heart. We've really tried to increase the number of dual immersion programs in the district. In my district, we have increased the number of Mandarin programs, Spanish programs, and now a French program that now is a K-8 school, Richland in West LA. I've been proud to support Lashon and our Hebrew language charter schools, but I do think that as we think about as a district-wide goal, graduating every student biliterate and bilingual, that Hebrew has a role to play. And I would love to learn more about where those families are and figure out where it makes sense. But as we think about attracting families back to the district, which is a big priority of mine, making this a strong option, I think having a Hebrew language program would help us. And so I would love to continue this conversation. I'm also mentioning, I've been in conversations with the district too, as it relates to this a little bit, with some of our food distribution sites and seeing if we can't get kosher meals there as well. And we haven't been successful yet because of the cost and the reimbursement, but just for those who are watching, it's something that I've been trying to do, and I hope to have some updates soon, because we know that there are members of our Jewish community for whom this has been a tough few months, and if we can provide free kosher meals as a school district, I believe that could be helpful. But yes, I would love to find ways to continue to support and create, I'd love in the next couple of years in my tenure in my first term to open our first Hebrew program. So let's continue to.
Yeah, we will. We definitely will.
Great.
All right, so Orly, I'm going to keep you on because we got Eden. She was able to join us. Eden, are you ready? Can you wave if you're ready? Eden is ready. Awesome. So Eden, we went ahead and read your question about the charter schools. But Nick, Eden is a parent at Lashon. She's one of our parents from Lashon Academy. So one of the things, and kind of the next question we'll talk about is the challenges regarding anti-Semitism and intolerance. And we look at, kind of to bridge that topic, we look at foreign language as a way to see and connect other cultures and to kind of minimize a sense of the other, and kind of, we're all Angelenos, we're all part of the same family. So Eden, maybe you can say hello and maybe share the story that you like to share about Lashon and seeing the Latino families learning Hebrew.
Well, good evening, Board Member Melvin. Well, I'm Eden. Nice to meet you.
You too.
I'm a mother of 2 kids. One is finished first grade, and my oldest, she finished 5th. Both of them are in Lashon Academy. It is a charter school. And after Dr. Dylan's mentioning my experience, when we were searching for school, just what made us just register them and decide on Lashon was that, well, except the fact that we are Israelis, and of course Hebrew and is their heritage, and we wanted them to continue to study it. We scheduled an appointment with one of the school's associates, and by chance it happened that we walked into a class of Hebrew. It was a Hebrew class, and we entered and we saw a small kids, I think 2nd grade, first grade or 2nd grade, I don't know, and they were Latino families, there were some Jewish families, there were African American kids, and it was so heartwarming to see that during this Hebrew school, they were sharing. It was Monday, so they were sharing their experiences with the teacher in Hebrew about their family weekends and how they spent it, and they were talking Hebrew. That was I was crying, happy tears, because it's so uncommon to see kids that are not even Jewish, some of them not Jewish, talking about talking in Hebrew, what they did, like simple sentences, but they communicated with the Hebrew teacher about where they went and what they did with their dads and moms and families. And it was great. It was great. And later on, during our parents' meetings in Lashon before the lockdown, some of the moms and some of the dads said, okay, who are Latino families and Afro-American families, and they are not Jewish, and they said, well, apparently we thought we were saving for a Disney trip, but it looks like now we are saving for the Holy Land trip to the Holy Land, to Israel, to Jerusalem, because the kids all want to go there and they want to see and they want to experience the culture, the history. So apparently we're saving for that now. That was funny. That was great, funny, excitement. Just that kids want to do that. They want to broaden their horizons.
Language and culture are connecting people. When you know the language and about the culture, it's definitely going to make you curious about where are you from and what are the customs and what are the tradition things. So it's not only, I think it's not only important for the Jewish or the Israeli community, it's also important for the other communities
yeah, and I think it's such a wonderful story, and thank you for sharing. I think that one of the challenges, and I actually wrote an op-ed in the Daily News about this a few months ago after we saw an unfortunate increase in anti-Semitic graffiti around LA, is that I think that we've, as educators too, we've sold ourselves short by really focusing on tolerance as opposed to appreciation and excitement and celebration. I think we even have a museum right in LA of tolerance, but I think for our students, and what I try to inculcate with our communities is more than tolerance, but a real appreciation and value of Judaism, but also of African-American history, of Latino history, of Spanish. And so it's so gratifying. And I think that, just as you can be taught hatred and anti-Semitism, you can be taught the opposite, which is an appreciation. And I remember when I started teaching, I just graduated college and I was teaching 7th grade in Watts. And one of my smartest students, a Latino student named Nelson, when he found out I was Jewish, was so confused and scared. And he grew up very Catholic, and he didn't know a Jew. He didn't know anything. And so had I not been in his life, he could have gone on to, believe a lot of these stereotypes and these tropes. But because we were able to learn, and I just started a very basic understanding of like, who are the Jews and what are our shared struggles. I think now too, one of the things I've been so proud about in our faith, in our Jewish tradition, has been our struggle for justice and our solidarity with other groups. And so I think right now, particularly, is an opportunity for us to kind of show more solidarity with, in this case, recently the Black community, and build that appreciation and shared understanding. And so I think it starts in elementary school. It starts with a shared appreciation of language. It starts with a curriculum that really exposes students to new perspectives. And, so I think that's how, when we think about how do we educate the next generation so that we can reduce instances of anti-Semitism, it's a lot about making sure that they're in the same spaces and they learn to see people as other children. And then it's very hard to then get those students to believe any of these stereotypes once they know somebody as their friend or as their classmate.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, well said. Yeah, I agree. And we are actually, we are global citizens of the world. It doesn't matter who you are or who you think your God is there. Really, and you can find whatever you want in the Holy Land. Like Jerusalem is a city of all religions, really, and you can find whatever you're looking there. It doesn't really matter. Like people are putting the limits, and people can also undo those limits. That's what I think.
Exactly.
And the culture.
And Ed, and real quick, just before we move on, how long have you been in LA?
Me?
Yeah.
Wow, we're actually very new. We came in November.
So just
wow. Well, welcome.
Yeah, well, hell of a timing.
Wow. It's really fantastic welcome.
Yeah,
So-
thank you.
So I'm gonna bring up Rena and Vered one more time, just to I'm gonna close this out here with just one question. Welcome, Rena, and let's get Vered. Here is Vered. Thank you. All right, so Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to speak to our community tonight. So just to close this out, I want to go a little bit further about anti-Semitism and intolerance in general. We understand now more than ever that anti-Semitism is on the rise, along with racism and other forms of discrimination. And sometimes we see it on our school campuses, like you mentioned, some of the tagging and other vandalism. But much of this discriminatory activity seems to be due to misunderstanding others, or not being educated enough about different cultures. Do you kind of agree with this assessment? And if so, what can we do to help facilitate greater cross-community engagement in such a large school district?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges is our size, in that we cover 720 square miles. And so I gave the example earlier of my student, and part of the problem was that he lived in Watts and never got out of Watts. And so I've been advocating actually for free metro passes for students so that they could do everything from go to the Museum of Tolerance or to see friends in other communities. So I think kind of those cross-cultural exchanges, even in our own city, are really important. I think we need to be thoughtful about what we teach, and I think that when we think about teaching other cultures, we need to do so in a way that increases tolerance and doesn't increase divisiveness. And so one of the things I've been engaged with at the state and local level is the ethnic studies conversation, because I think I believe that we should be teaching about marginalized and underrepresented groups, but in a way that connects the Jewish story to that story, and also shows kind of how global fights around justice and things like the Holocaust, and have all kind of affected today's climate. And so I've been an opponent of the ethnic studies curriculum in its current form. There's a new draft that's coming down soon, and we'll be reviewing it, and if it is responsive to the concerns of our community, then that is something that I will be interested to support. But I think that's really important, and I think we have to call out, it's to continue with that example. I mean, to not include anti-Semitism around hate crimes when it's been the fastest growing hate crime, I think is just, so that's that. From our vantage point, though, that also means sitting down with other communities and trying to build coalitions. And so I've been trying to find ways to have joint events with not only kind of rabbis and Jewish leaders, but also members of the Black church. And how do we kind of bridge our shared struggle? I also think it comes about teacher training. And actually, one of the things when I got into office is there was a salary point course for teachers that they could take. And it was ostensibly supposed to be about learning about the Arab world, but I was informed by some who took it that there was kind of a BDS curriculum embedded in it. And so we went in and we stopped the course. And I think we need to think about how we're educating our teachers to talk about tough conflicts. And that's not to say that educators shouldn't be well-versed in teaching the Arab world. They just should do so with the lens of tolerance and inclusivity and not kind of political propaganda. So, I think that work continues. It starts also at the earlier we go. And so I've been a big proponent of early childhood education. We're opening up new preschools in my district, and I think that's important to get kids in school, but also to do that intermingling. But so, yeah, I mean, Dylan, I do agree with that assessment. It comes from a lack of understanding. And it's important that we continue to call it out when we see it. And I think this is an important moment as we see, and not to detract from the struggle around racial justice, especially for our Black community members, but to tie that into the global struggle and see how we can show solidarity in a way that unifies us as opposed to divides us.
So I will say too that we're with you on the ethnic studies thing, and we've had we really have had an army of Israeli mothers advocating and talking to Sacramento and bothering Tony Thurmond about this and making sure that we have an inclusive ethnic studies. Vered has led on that as ICANN California chairwoman. I do want to say too that, and again, I take my leadership from Vered on this issue. She has really been a proponent of engaging other communities, the African American community, the Latino community, and helping to stem that rising tide of misunderstanding and otherizing other communities. And now that we began this conversation talking about online instruction, so is there a way to use this new connectivity to help students from across the district, from East LA to the Valley, from West LA to South LA, Angelinos from different backgrounds, to talk to each other and learn about each other to help promote that kind of mutual respect? Now that we're all going to be online, is there a way to promote that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when I was teaching too, and I was driving from the west side of LA to the south side, I realized that, we spend a lot of time thinking about pen pals and kind of global connectivity, but we don't think enough about kind of just within our own city and how do we foster kind of pen pal relationships within LA. And so I do think that technology can help us bridge that gap. We're looking at everything from, if you're a smaller high school in LA Unified and you can't offer AP Mandarin, to use a language example, can you then take that class remotely from another school? And how do we think about even electives and teachers kind of adopting maybe classes at other parts of LA? And I think that this is, I just have to tell a great anecdote because it's relevant to the conversation. But I was speaking at Taft High School in the Valley, I guess 5 or 6 months ago because we were in person, and it was a summit for African American leadership. And the gentleman who had started this was like a 70-year-old Black man who was a former teacher. And he used to teach middle school. And I guess after leaving school one day, he was going to coach basketball, which was his second job. And one of his students, a Jewish student, was kind of running by and asked him, said, "Mr. Fluker, where are you going?" And he said, "I'm going to my second job." And the student said, "Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to my second school." And this Black teacher said, "Oh, what do you mean your second school?" And he said, "I'm going to Hebrew school." And the teacher said, "Oh, that's interesting. What do you learn there?" And the Jewish student said, "Oh, nothing much, just how great my people are," and started skipping along. And he said, this Black educator said, "I was so impressed by that kid had such pride and knew who he was, that I wanted to create this Black summit for students." And I think that, it was a really beautiful moment for me, because I think it went to, one, it reframed Hebrew school for me. I was like, oh, that is interesting. But it also was about how we can kind of share how we teach our own history in a way to say every student should be able to learn about their people and how great they are. And I think that, this is an opportunity, maybe through more digital connections, but also just in this moment of racial reckoning, for us to say, how do we build people up, and how do we make sure that every kid knows how great they are, but also how great other cultures are. And I think that's one of the things that draws me to education, and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone have any other closing questions, comments? All right, so I guess we will say thank you and good night. You guys want to say thank you and good night?
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
Thank you all, and please, I make myself available. My door is proverbially always open, and so reach out with individual questions, and then Orly will continue the conversation about Hebrew language programs too.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Orly, Rena, Vered, Eden. Thank you so much for making it, and thank you, Nick. We'll be in touch.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Appreciate it, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.